All right, so this is going to be Kamala Harris coming out at the NABJ. Now, if you remember, a month or two ago, Trump was at this same event and they grilled him. They were asking him the hard-hitting questions. It was a very intense interview. So I'm just wondering if they're actually going to hold her to the same accountability with the kind of questions that they're going to ask her. I'm kind of curious, with it being a National Association of Black Journalists, are they going to bring up the reparations issue in the past where that she had talked about wanting to give reparations? Is she going to double down on that? That kind of thing. So let's see what she actually has to say here.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Madam Vice President, thank you so much for doing this and making the time.
Of course.
Just a little bit busy right now. We want to start on an issue that Americans across the country say is their number one concern, and that's the economy. Mm-hmm. A question that has been asked of you and everybody that's on the Democratic side is whether or not voters are better off now than they were 4 years ago. Are they better off now than they were 4 years ago?
We're starting off strong.
So when we came into, well, first of all, let me just say it is good to be with the National Association of Black Journalists, and I thank you for the work you do and that your members do every day. It is very important that we ensure that this organization and your members always have the resources and the platforms to deliver the voices that must be heard. So I thank you for hosting me today. 4 years ago, when we came in during the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. We came in during the worst public health epidemic in centuries. We came in after the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And a lot of it due in large part to the mismanagement by the former president.
So she seems really nervous, and you think this would be like home base for her, because I don't necessarily think that they're gonna actually hold her accountable here. I think they're gonna probably be friendly with her, even though this was a good first question. So we'll see if it kind of develops from there. But she seems nervous. She's probably thinking what happened to Trump is about to happen to her, and maybe she's just getting warmed up a little bit.
As it relates to COVID and obviously January 6th. And we had then a lot of work to do to clean up a mess. As of today, we have created over 16 million new jobs, over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. We have the lowest Black unemployment rate in generations. We have invested in small businesses, and they're to the benefit of many people, but including Black small businesses, some of the highest rate of creation of new Black small businesses in years. We have done the work of capping the cost of prescription medication for our seniors for issues like insulin. And again, I'm speaking to the Black journalists who care about all people, but in particular, I'll talk about the impact on Black people, where we know Black folks are 60% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes. And we have now finally capped the cost of insulin for our seniors at $35 a month, capped the cost of prescription medication for our seniors at $2,000 a year, because we, unlike the former president who promised to do it, we finally have allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices against the big pharmaceutical companies.
I still don't think they can claim high unemployment while also claiming the pandemic. It would have happened regardless who was president. I want to believe that Americans understand that. I want to believe that Americans are intelligent enough to realize that we had a pandemic at the tail end of Trump's presidency, and that these numbers will be a little bit skewed because of that. I'd like to believe that people are smart enough to realize that.
And these are just some of the accomplishments. Is the price of groceries still too high? Yes. Do we have more work to do? Yes. And I will tell you, I do believe that I offer a new generation of leadership for our country that is about, in particular, turning the page on an era that sadly has shown us attempts by some to incite fear, to create division in our country, and to do the work that is about bringing some level of optimism and, dare I say, ambition about what I know is possible in our country.
Mind you, she's been the VP for, quite a time now. So you would think the page would already have been turned.
And so my plan for the economy includes what I imagine and believe and call an opportunity economy. What we can do to grow an opportunity economy where all people have access to the resources to compete, to apply their incredible work ethic, their ambition, their aspirations, and their dreams, and actually not just get by, but get ahead.
So the question was, are people better off now than they were 4 years ago? That was the question. She's going on this big emotional play on emotions is pretty much what she's doing here. She's not really answering the question. This is the same thing that we actually saw in the debate, the same thing we actually saw in her last interview with that local news reporter, which was terrible. It was just god awful. They were asking her specific policy questions and she just goes on to, well, I grew up in a small town, blah, 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 blah.
And I can talk in more detail about it, but specifically, I'll mention a few things.
Yeah.
One of the big issues that affects people right now in terms of the economy and their economic well-being is we have a shortage of housing supply. It's too expensive. People can't afford to buy a home. You know, we grew up, our parents, where they had the ability to somehow believe the American dream was attainable. Not so much for younger working people. And I recognize that. So my approach is a new approach, which is to say, let's just take this and deal with it head on. And part of my approach is to say, I'm going to employ and engage the private sector, in particular home builders with tax credits, to give them the incentive to create new housing, 3 million by the end of my first term, and understanding that not everybody is, handed a silver spoon, but works hard and is trying to save up for a down payment. Part of my plan under my opportunity economy is to give first-time home buyers a $25,000 down payment assistance so they can just get their foot in the door to be able to then engage in what will prove to be their opportunity to build intergenerational wealth. And here's my personal experience coming at that. I grew up in middle class.
Here she goes again. I grew up in a middle class. Dude, this chick was rich. I don't know who we're trying to pretend here. I don't know what she's trying to convey. Nobody thinks that she grew up poor or knows the struggle of the American people. This is just straight up bull. I really hope these journalists put more pressure on her and don't just let her ramble about her feelings for forever. I really hope they actually hold her accountable. When it came to Trump, they were interjecting as he was talking and just going insane. Like, the whole thing was meme worthy, so I hope they actually do hold her accountable.
Kid. My mother was hardworking. She raised me and my sister Maya. She saved up, and it was only by the time I was a teenager that she could afford to actually buy her first home. And I know, and I identify with, I know where I come from.
Madam Vice President.
And I know, but I'm just going to finish. I know.
Yeah, cut her off.
That so many people work so hard and should have the opportunity to just get their foot in the door. Again, so it's not just about getting by, but getting ahead. Please.
I'd like to ask you more about the opportunity economy. Housing is a part of it, as well as expanding the earned income tax credit, financial support, as you mentioned, for first-time buyers, and a $50,000 tax deduction for startups and small businesses.
Yes.
But I want to talk to you about the squeeze that millions of Americans are also dealing with that impacts their ability to work and make money, and that is childcare and elder care. And it's a squeeze for millions of people. In some parts of the country, it costs more for childcare than for rents. I think Bloomberg recently reported an average of $33,000 a year. So I'm just wondering, you mentioned that in your opportunity economy, a child tax credit, but that's just one part of an ecosystem. Please tell us, what plans will you propose to guarantee that families can actually afford childcare and elder care?
So to your point, it is sadly the state of affairs in our country that working people often have to decide to either be able to work or be able to afford childcare. Like they can't afford childcare.
Okay. Here comes the word salad already. Jared saying bribes. I mean, yeah, she's appealing to emotions and trying to say that she's going to give all this stuff out for free, and people have to realize it's not free, right? They have to realize that there's going to be consequences from giving out all this money.
And actually do the work that they want to do, because it's too expensive and it doesn't actually level out in terms of the expense versus the income. My plan is that no working family should pay more than 7% of their income in childcare. Because I know that when you talk about the return on that investment, allowing people to work, allowing people to pursue their dreams in terms of how they want to work, where they want to work, benefits us all. It strengthens the entire economy. We saw, for example, during the pandemic what happened. And it sadly has dissipated as a conversation that we need to resuscitate, which is the number of women that had to leave the workforce because of a lack of childcare and home health care. And so many of our families, and in particular women, end up carrying the responsibility. Men do too, of course. What we call people who are in the sandwich generation.
Exactly.
Who have young children and are also taking care of their parents.
So she's not going to answer the question. That's what I'm getting from this. She's going to just meander around the question and not really talk about anything. They weren't even homeowners while she was growing up until her late teens. We were poor in the Oakland, and my parents were buying a house. I don't care what she says. She's not going to convince me that she was any kind of poor, that she actually knows what the struggle is of eating toaster leavings. You know what I'm talking about? Al Bundy reference. In the hood, but you could back then. You could buy a house. Yeah, I mean, I just hope she actually answers the question here.
And it is just absolutely too expensive for them to be able to work and do that. So my plan is not only about 7% of income for working people for childcare, but also we need to do better for our childcare providers and our home healthcare providers in terms of ensuring that they receive the wages that they deserve based on the dignity of their work. I have spent time with home healthcare providers, and their work is some of the most taxing work you can imagine. And I actually, when my mother was sick with cancer, did a lot in terms of taking care of her. And the work that is about taking care of a loved one, in particular an elder, is extraordinarily heavy in terms of the emotional toll, the time it takes, and we do it because that...
We all know this. Everybody knows this. She's not saying anything that people don't know. How are you going to help people? She did mention that people should not be spending more than 7% of their income on childcare. So are you trying to say that you're going to put another price control in there for childcare? And how is that going to affect all the businesses surrounding that? Is that what you're saying? My mom worked part-time as a teacher aide, but was able to be home for us after school. Yeah, she's right. It is rough right now. It's rough for people to have a stay-at-home parent. So you kind of have to have some kind of childcare, or you have to make a decision if it's worth that person to go to work or if they're spending more in childcare. But I'm not hearing any solution from her is the issue.
That is what we do, but not everyone has the ability to take time from work to do it, and they need help. And we need to make sure we have home health care workers that can help them. But I want to also get back to the earlier point that you made about extending the child tax credit. So part of my new approach is we need to expand the child tax credit. And so part of my plan that is under an opportunity economy is to extend and expand the child tax credit to $6,000 so that young families in particular, for the first year of their child's life, which is an extraordinarily important time in their development, have the resources to be able to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy children's clothing, and not have to worry about whether they're going to be able to meet their other needs.
So I saw a comment where somebody was actually talking about this. They tried to correct me and try to go into detail about how a child tax credit is just a deduction on your taxes. I understand that, but if you're giving deductions, that's still taking away from revenue. So if you're looking at the country as a business, you have revenue and then you have your expenses. So she's lowering revenue while increasing the expenses that are still going out, which is still not good for your business, right? Does anyone else think the corporate media has been influencing every presidential election since 2000 to be as close as possible so they get the best possible ratings and maximize their profits? No, personally, when you look at like Trump, they were bashing him his entire presidency. So I don't think that was close at all. I think they spent a good portion of their time just saying he was shit. My parents bought a house in Brooklyn in the 80s. Neither one of my parents graduated high school. My mom didn't work. And at the time, my dad was a taxi driver, hardly making any money. Yeah, man. But they made it. Gerald, same here. My parents bought their house in the early 80s, $33K and a 15% interest rate. Jesus.
And I don't need to remind anybody here, especially these esteemed journalists, but when we expanded the child tax credit a couple years ago, we reduced Black child poverty by half. And so again, if you talk about the benefit and if you think about the benefit to the economy overall, it strengthens our economy to do things like pay attention to affordable childcare, affordable home health care, and extending the child tax credit.
Madam Vice President, Black men, as you know, are a closely watched voting bloc. You've hosted Black men at your residence.
Yep.
You have engaged Black men and centered them in your economic opportunity tour.
Mm-hmm.
But polling shows that some Black men, particularly young Black men, are considering voting for Donald Trump, and they see him as better for the economy. What is your message to young Black male voters who feel left out of this economy, and how can your economic policies materially change their lives?
It's a good question.
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question in a way that I've had to respond by first saying that I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that Black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You gotta earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote. Not assuming I'm going to have it because I am Black, but
Right. And that means you can't appeal to emotion. They're literally asking you, what policies are you going to do to help the economy? So don't spend the next 5 minutes talking about your emotions, because my opinion, those young Black voters don't care. They want to be able to buy milk.
because the policies and the perspectives I have understands what we must do to recognize the needs of all communities. And I intend to be a president for all people. Specifically as it relates to what we need to do, to your point around economic opportunity. Yes, I started way before I was at the top of the ticket at what I called an economic opportunity tour, focused on Black men. Understanding that, for example, we have so many entrepreneurs in the community who do not have access to capital, but they've got great ideas, an incredible work ethic, the ambition, the aspiration, the dream, but don't have the relationships necessarily. So my work has included, as vice president, getting billions more dollars into community banks, including working with the big banks to do that, so that we can increase access to capital for our small businesses, for our startups. Part of my plan under my economic opportunity plan going forward is that right now, startup entrepreneurs, small businesses only get a tax deduction of $5,000. Nobody can start a small business with $5,000. So I'm expanding that to $50,000. Understanding, again, that when people have the opportunity to have the resources to get started, they're gonna put the good ideas, they're gonna put the hard work into it. And part of what I also know is that our young Black men, our Black men, just like any group of people, anybody, our small businesses are really the backbone of our economy overall. And when they do better economically, we all do better.
So again, consider tax deduction. You're decreasing revenue while our debt is at an all-time high. Just something to think about. my parents' little house was $20K in the 70s in Oakland. Damn. Imagine buying a house for $20K. Biden assumes he had the black voters in his pocket. Yeah, because remember, if you don't vote for him, you're not black. Remember how well that worked out for him? Trump has white people at his rallies wearing blacks for Trump shirts. Why? Are they just trying to troll or something? That just seems stupid. More bribes. Yeah, more bribes. But again, I just want people to think, like, I know what a tax deduction is, but it's still a decrease in revenue while you're spending more. If you had a small coffee shop, how do you think that's going to work? Nobody's paying you, but you're going out and buying more, leveraging more debt. How does that work for your business?
Part of my work is about understanding what we need to do in dealing with, for example, the historic inequities that have faced the Black community around home ownership, right? I don't have to go through the history with anybody here about what that has meant in terms of redlining, what that has meant in terms of biases in home appraisals, and what the impact it has had on stemming the opportunity to build intergenerational wealth because of those obstacles. So part of the work that I have done and will continue to do is identify, speak truth about those obstacles, and address them. Another example is medical debt. 1 in 4 Black families or individuals is more likely to carry medical debt than others. So part of my perspective, and as vice president, part of the work that we have done is to say that we're going to eliminate medical debt from being on your credit score.
How are they going to make up that deficit, increase taxes somewhere else? Well, her plan is that she thinks she's going to tax all of the big evil corporations, right? But really, those big evil corporations have money and they're just going to leave the US. They're going to go make money somewhere else. As soon as she starts talking about unrealized capital gains, all of the major companies are going to bail on us, and that's going to crush our economy. Trump wants to drop corporate tax rate to 15%, costing billions in revenue. Let's see. Let's fact check.
Until now, medical debt worked against your credit score, and people know their credit score like you wait, right? You know that number. And the difference between what that number is and what it needs to be is the difference between you being able to get a car loan, a small business loan, or even a leasing on an apartment. And so part of my approach is understanding the obstacles that traditionally and currently exist to allow.
Let me see. So this is what Paul's talking about. It says Donald Trump proposal to lower the corporate tax rate to 15%. So we're looking at Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, if you believe in them or not. But this is definitely something Trump has talked about. This is part of his plan. He is in the party of believing that if you lower the taxes for these people, that they're going to spread out their businesses, they're going to create jobs, it's going to make American-owned companies come back, and everybody's going to flourish from that. Now, I get a lot of people don't believe in the trickle-down theory, so that's where you kind of have to decide where you want to vote from there. But yeah, that's definitely a plan for what he wants to do here.
Anyone, including Black men, be able to achieve economic wealth. And I'm going to tell you, I don't think it is sufficient to just only talk about economic policy around reducing unemployment. It is an important marker, and I'm proud of the work that we've done thus far, but it should be a baseline there. Everybody's working. The point is, do people have an opportunity to build wealth? If that's what they choose to do, if that's what they want to do. And a lot of my perspective as we go forward is just that. I believe that there are a lot of opportunities that are available to the American people if we see people and understand what they want for themselves and their families and then meet them where they are.
Madam Vice President.
That didn't explain anything of what they asked. She makes it sound like she's getting rid of medical debt. She's just removing it from the credit report. They still owe the medical debt. I mean, she can't just wave her wand and suddenly all of the medical debt disappears. It's just another play on emotions. I think one of her policies was that having medical debt not be a factor in their credit report Maybe that's a good idea. I'm not totally against that, to wreck somebody's credit just because they had some kind of medical issue. So I see that. Not necessarily a bad idea, but they're still going to have to afford those things. They're still going to need to be able to have the capital. So if you have a major illness, you have this huge pile of medical debt, you can't just go out and buy a home anyway. That's the whole point of having the credit report, because it's, in a way, is protecting those people from not going out and leveraging too much and putting themselves in more financial ruin. More people in medical collections because they don't know the wording, for sure.
President, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the war in Gaza. Mm-hmm. You've called for a ceasefire hostage deal and a two-state solution as an end to the war for many months now. And while you've expressed support for Israel to defend itself, a two-state solution and a ceasefire are at odds with what Benjamin Netanyahu has said is their right to defense. If it matters, as you say, how Israel defends itself, where do you see the line between aggression and defense? And our power as Israel's ally to do something.
Okay, a lot to unpack in what you just
Their right to explode some pagers, apparently.
said. So let's start with this. I absolutely believe that this war has to end, and it has to end as soon as possible. And the way that will be achieved is by getting a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done. And we are working around the clock to achieve that end. Stepping back, October 7, 1,200 Israelis were slaughtered, and actually in some Americans, by the way.
I'm thinking about running for president. If this is all you have to do, it'd come out there and be like, cancer's bad. Yeah, cancer is just the most terrible thing. I have emotions for people who have families with cancer and who have died of cancer, and just completely avoid the question, is this all you got to do? Get people to vote for you? Like, this is really how far we've come? This is sad. It's sad and frustrating and annoying all at the same time.
By the way, in that number, slaughtered. Young people who were attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And yes, so I have said, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And,
But Madam Vice President, I think my ask is the
go.
difference
let me
between
finish.
aggression
Finally.
and defense.
But it's important to put it in context, which is what I'm doing, and I'll get to that. And so how it does so matters.
It's not.
And far
People know that war is bad. You're wasting time.
too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Women and children. We have seen with horror the images coming out of Gaza. And we have to take that seriously. And we have to agree that not only must we end this war, but we have to have a goal of a two-state solution, because there must be stability and peace in that region, in as much as what we do in our goal is to ensure that Israelis have security and Palestinians in equal measure have security.
All right, she's pulling out the talk to you like a kindergartner tactic now. We've completely devolved in that. Next up is word salad.
Have self-determination and dignity.
A question for you on that, though. What levers does the U.S. have to support Palestinians in their right to self-determination? And is it even possible as Israel's ally?
Well, absolutely. I will tell you, I have been actively involved in, for example, meeting not only with Israeli officials, but with Arab officials to talk about how we can construct a day after scenario where we participate in ensuring those exact goals that I outlined, including as part of the principles that should be applied to those goals, that there be no reoccupation of Gaza, that there be no changing of the territorial lines in Gaza, that there be an ability to have security in the region for all concerned in a way that we create stability, and let us also recognize in a way that ensures that Iran is not empowered
And what the stability does is it stops the firing, which is the goal of the original meeting of what I met with the Arab community. She's just going around in circles. Like, she's not saying shit. If she gets elected, do you think she's going to be able to get a ceasefire and create a two-state solution in Israel? We would hope. All we can do is hope. How can we push for a two-state solution when Israel doesn't want a two-state solution? Yes, still attacking. This war is still going on, and I don't know what she thinks she's going to do differently when she's already in the situation now. She doesn't need to be president to be out there actually trying to fix this situation. Bothers me when we put someone like 45 in the White House, makes the U.S. look stupid. I don't disagree with you, Paul. I think some of the things he says is kind of stupid. I mean, when you look at the debate, go back and look at the long video I posted of when we watched the debate, and I called it. I said Harris won that just because she was able to compose herself. She practiced. She looked better. You know, you can argue the little nuances, of course, but if you're just taking it for what it is, I thought she came off more presidential, even though she wasn't answering the questions. Paul, in my opinion, 46 didn't seem too powerful either. I mean, dude, he didn't at all. Tripping downstairs and all of that bullshit. But I get what Paul's saying though. Like he's not the presidential candidate. He doesn't have the aura of Obama, where Obama, you could see him like taking care of his family, and he actually had that like presidentialness to him, even though maybe a lot of people think his politics were shit. With you, at least he seemed like a better role model for the community, maybe, compared to someone like Trump. People are going to shit on me for saying that too, but whatever. That's how we do it here. Netanyahu doesn't want a ceasefire. Exactly. So even trying to work on this ceasefire is going to be very difficult for whoever is president.
In this whole scenario, in terms of the peace and stability of the region. But absolutely, the United States of America absolutely has a role, which is why we have been active, in particular with the Qataris and the Egyptians, around attempting to get a deal done and get it done as quickly as possible.
But Madam Vice President, just to follow up really quickly, is there a specific policy change that you as President of the United States would say you would do that would help this along? Because you've gotten a lot of credit for emphasizing the humanity of Palestinians. Mm-hmm. But what I often hear from folks is that there's no policy change that either you or President Biden have gone and said they would do. Is there a specific policy change as president that you would do in our helping of Israel?
We need to get this deal done, and we need to get it done immediately, and that is my position, and that is my policy. We need to get this deal done.
But in the way that we send weapons, in the way that we interact as their ally, are there specific policy changes?
Well, Eugene, for example, one of the things that we have done that I am entirely supportive of is the pause that we've put on the 2,000-pound bombs. And so there is some leverage that we have had and used.
Just to support Paul's point, I specifically remember when Trump was president. I was deployed overseas in the Middle East, and when you need to go back to your barracks, you would have to go to this bus stop. You either wait for the bus, or there was a rideshare system where people that had cars on the base, you could kind of ride along with them, and maybe they take you back to your barracks. So, and that was faster than waiting for the bus a lot of times. So I specifically remember multiple times that I was trying to get a ride back to the barracks, and the foreign militaries would give you a ride back. So you get to kind of talk to them and, see a little bit like, what is their experience? What's going on with these guys? Different allied partners, right? And every time I got in one of these guys' cars, they would look at me and they'd like, so what do you think of Trump? Immediately. And you could just tell like the respect for being a president wasn't really there, and they wanted to see what an American military guy thought of his commander in chief. So that just kind of proves Paul's point when they were like, what is going on with this guy? He flies off the cuff. He's tweeting furiously. People at the time felt like we were on the brink of war. You can argue now with this administration, we're even closer to war. But at the time, the way he was furiously tweeting, people thought we were about to hit World War III. So that was the atmosphere at the time. And I see what Paul's saying with Trump not being presidential.
But ultimately, the thing that is going to unlock everything else in that region is getting this deal done. And I'm not going to disclose private conversations, but I will tell you, I've had direct conversations with the Prime Minister, with the President of Israel, with Egyptian leaders, and with our allies. And I think we've made ourselves very clear this deal needs to get done in the best interest of everyone in the region, including getting those hostages out who, I mean, we saw the latest example of what happened with the 6 most recently, one of whom was an American citizen.
But what do you say to those that say that's not enough, that stopping the 2,000-pound bombs the one time wasn't enough, that this administration, your possible administration, has to do more?
Well, we are doing the work of putting the pressure on all parties involved to get the deal done. But let me be very clear also. I support Israel's ability to defend itself. And I support the need for Palestinians to have dignity, self-determination, and security as we move forward and get a two-state deal done. But right now, the thing we need to get done is this hostage deal and this ceasefire deal. We need a ceasefire. We need the hostage deal.
I want to switch gears.
Has she had any conversation with Hamas, I wonder? Doubt it. She's starting to get shaky in her voice. She has no answers because that reporter just slightly tried to push back on her. And that's when she started to get shaky again. Not even like anywhere close to the level Trump was dealing with, but just a little pushback and she's starting to fold.
Here's to racial justice, Madam Vice President. Last month, you eulogized Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
Yeah.
Jackson Lee's signature bill, one of a few, was H.R. 40, which would create a commission to study the history of U.S. slavery and study the issue of reparations.
Here we go.
She introduced H.R. 40 every session of Congress, taking up the mantle from Congressman John Conyers. This is a bill that you have co-sponsored as a U.S. Senator. Yet, this has, despite the fact that this has been, similar commissions have been created on the state level and on the local level, is yet to pass in Congress, let alone come out of committee. Congresswoman Jackson Lee, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and other advocates have called for President Biden to take executive action to create this commission. Would you, as president, take executive action to create this commission, or do you believe that it should happen in Congress?
Well, first of all, as you mentioned, Sheila Jackson Lee, she was an extraordinary leader who we just recently lost, and she was a friend and a real champion for so many issues. So I feel compelled to say that about her. On the issue of what we need to do going forward, look, first of all, we just need to speak truth about history in spite of the fact that some people would try and erase history and try and teach our children otherwise.
Who's trying to erase history? I spent my entire time in high school, and it was, or my entire, probably freshman, a lot of sophomore. All we did was talk about the Civil War. And it wasn't even necessarily about the Civil War, like the fighting and everything going on. It was more about slavery. I don't know what she's trying to say, erase history. Is she talking about the Confederate statues that they're pulling down? Is that erasing history?
We need to speak truth about the generational impact of our history in terms of the generational impact of slavery, the generational impact of redlining, of Jim Crow law. I could go on and on and on. These are facts that have had impact. And we need to speak truth about it. And we need to speak truth about it in a way that is about deriving solutions. And frankly, I think that we, and part of that is studying it to figure out exactly what we need to do. But part of what we can do right now is, for example, what I'm talking about in terms of building an opportunity economy, which is addressing explicitly the obstacles that historically and currently exist and dealing with them. Student loan debt, medical debt, bias in home appraisals, what we need to do in terms of dealing with an issue that I have championed for years, Black maternal mortality.
Why can't she actually answer the question? She hasn't answered one question.
Which is the fact that Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in connection with childbirth than other women. And we know that the reasons for that include disparities that pre-exist her pregnancy, including disparities that exist in the system during her pregnancy. So all of those things must be addressed.
Do you have a position on whether that should happen, this commission should happen through executive order or via Congress?
I think Congress ultimately will have the ability to do this work. I'm not discounting the importance of any executive action, but ultimately Congress. Because if you're going to talk about it in any substantial way, there will be hearings, there will be a level of public education and dialogue that, and I think that was part of the spirit behind the congressional action thus far.
Okay, good answer. She actually answered it finally after she was pressed to answer the question. She's talking about Texas and Florida trying to take slavery out of the curriculum. Florida and Texas are not doing that. No, they are not.
To ensure that everyone can participate in this conversation in a way that elevates knowledge about history and the reference points that have that are the impetus of this conversation. Especially, again, when people are trying to deny history, when people are, so-called leaders are saying that enslaved people benefited from slavery. I mean, let's talk about the Delta.
Who said that? What is he? Oh, my
In
God.
terms of the work that needs to be done. It's profound.
Madam Vice President, I want to move to Springfield, Ohio, and what's happening there. We've seen school closures, parents worried about their kids leaving the home because of racist conspiracy theories that I won't repeat here, but they have been repeated by leaders on the Republican side, President Trump, former President Trump, and Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance.
I won't say any names, but I'm going to say some names.
From your perspective, is this just a case of irredeemable racism that can't be mitigated by any rational action, or is this a situation in which a federal response could help this community heal? There's a question of resources and...
Well, no, I'll let you finish and then I'll speak.
No, please.
It's a crying shame. I mean, my heart breaks for this community. There were children, elementary school children, who it was school photo day.
She kind of looks like the Grinch. Not trying to be a hater, but when the way she looked off to the camera and she was like, she reminded me of Jim Carrey playing the Grinch a little bit.
You remember what that's like? Going to school on picture day? Who are dressed up in their best, got all ready, knew what they were going to wear the night before, and had to be evacuated. Children. A whole community put in fear.
There has been many accounts from multiple races in Ohio all claiming the same thing about the pets. Yeah, there has. And I don't even... Man, I'm not from Ohio. I don't want to get into it. I don't know if they're eating the pets or not. It could be some crazy internet bullshit, but then I go online and I see people from Ohio supposedly are backing up the claim. So I don't know. I just want to stay out of it. It's silly. It sounds silly. Yeah, she looks evil there. Yeah, she looked like the Grinch. She reminds me of Jim Carrey's Grinch.
And I'll say a couple things about it. One, I learned a long time ago in my career, having a background as a prosecutor, when you have these positions, when you have that kind of microphone in front of you, you really ought to understand at a very deep level how much your words have meaning. I learned at a very young stage in my career that the meaning of my words could impact whether somebody was free or in prison. As Attorney General, I was of California, fifth largest economy in the world. I was acutely aware that my words could move markets. When you are bestowed with a microphone that is that big, there is a profound responsibility that comes with that. That is an extension of what should not be lost in this moment, this concept of the public trust. To then understand what the public trust means. It means that you have been invested with trust.
So I heard all the bomb threats were a hoax, and most of them came from overseas. I'm not even going to say that they're hoax. I don't know if they are or not. I just think it's stupid. You have a debate. Trump says they're eating cats and dogs, and then you have people call into hospitals with bomb threats. I don't even see how any of that's related and how she's tying that to Trump. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand her logic where she's going from there. It doesn't, like, he told them to call in bomb threats into schools because Haitians are eating cats and dogs. Where's the logic in that? Where does any of this make sense? And it's just a clear play on your emotions. It really is. We could argue that the whole thing is stupid for Trump to say that, especially at a presidential debate. We could argue that it's wrong. It never happened. It's not a thing. But there's no real connection there. Bomb threats in a debate where they're talking about eating cats and dogs, that's just stupid. It's just dumb. Who does that? Who goes, oh, he just said that they're eating cats and dogs on stage. You know what I'm going to do because of that? I'm going to call in a bomb threat into an educational center. That makes sense. Does she know that Putin, Netanyahu, or any other world leader cares that she was a prosecutor for California? They laugh at California like the rest of us. Yeah, none of this is important. She's trying to seem tough. That's the whole point behind this. She wants to seem like a strong leader. I don't like this tyrannical speech she gives about how she found out her words could put people in jail. Exactly. After all of the people's lives that she ruined, now she's talking about it. So this is where the reporter should actually follow up, where they talk about all of the young black men that she put in jail, because of her words, right? That's where they should actually be holding her accountable. I don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to keep throwing her some softball questions and let her talk about her emotions, a little bit more.
To be responsible in the way you use your words, much less how you conduct yourself. And especially when you have been and then seek to be again President of the United States of America. And so I go back to, it's a crying shame, literally. What's happening to those families, those children in that community, not to mention what is happening in terms of, look, you say you care about law enforcement resources being put into this because of these serious threats that are being issued against a community that is living a productive, good life before this happened.
Again, Trump didn't call in the bomb threats, so I don't know what she's talking about. Google whitewashing history textbooks, that is what she was talking about. We'll see what we can find.
And spewing lies that are grounded in tropes that are age old. And look, I said it not very far from here the other day at the debate. This is not new. This is not new in terms of these tropes. This is not new in terms of where it's coming from. And, whether it is refusing to rent to black families, whether it is taking out a full-page ad in the New York Times against 5 innocent black and Latino teenagers, the Central Park 5, calling for their execution, whether it is referring to the first Black president of the United States with a lie, birther lies. And look, the American people deserve, and I do believe want better than this. I do believe that. I know the vast majority of us as Americans know we have so much more in common than what separates us. I know that. I know that regardless of someone's background, their race, their gender, their geographic location, I know that people are deeply troubled by what is happening to that community in Springfield, Ohio. And it's got to stop. And we've got to say that you cannot be entrusted with standing behind the seal of the President of the United States of America, engaging in that hateful rhetoric that, as usual, is designed to divide us as a country, is designed to have people pointing fingers at each other. It's designed to do that. And I think most people in our country, regardless of their race, are starting to see through this nonsense and to say, you know what, let's turn the page on this. This is exhausting and it's harmful and it's hateful and grounded in some age-old stuff that we should not have the tolerance for. So let's turn the page and chart a new way forward and say, you can't have that microphone again.
Madam Vice President, I'm switching gears again.
Okay.
Quick question. I want to talk to you about gun control.
Before she gets into that, I believe her on Project 25, hilarious for Trump to deny it. She lied about no military members being deployed. Yeah, she did lie about that. I am on X, but I don't post anything on there, so I'm not really on there. I'm only on there to look at immediate news, just to see like live reports if I can. They weren't technically in combat zones. The ones she was talking about were in Iraq, and that's a combat zone for sure. This is what you were talking about, I think. So this is from The Guardian. It says, The Guardian analysis comes as backlash around anti-racist education in public schools has reached a fever pitch. About half of the states have enacted or looking at to enact restrictions on discussion of systematic racism. In Florida, for example, the State Board of Education recently voted to ban teaching of critical race theory and the 1619 Project, a curriculum born out of a New York Times Magazine initiative that seeks to reframe American history through the historical legacy of slavery. So looking at that, I understand that they're putting limitations on what maybe someone on a far left side would want, but they're not banning the teaching of slavery. That's what she was claiming. Nobody's banning the teaching of slavery in Florida and Texas. They're banning these critical race theories, ideas, and all this other stuff, but it's not slavery. They're still teaching history. The ad about the Central Park 5, I believe he never called out race. He wanted to bring the death penalty back. I can't find the full ad, so I can't be sure. Let me see. Go back into our video, see what she's talking about. So she's getting ready to talk about guns, which she's pretty much already clarified this at this point. She wants to ban assault rifles. So she's going to start out this. If she's repeating the same things that she said in the debate and her past interview, she's going to go, look, I'm a gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun owner. We're not going to ban your guns. And then she's going to talk about her emotions some more. And then she's going to say, we're going to ban assault rifles, which is banning guns. So if I had a bingo board, we would definitely be nailing this one.
So you've said you support an assault weapons ban and universal background checks, and we actually learned during the debate that you are a gun owner. Mm-hmm. But in cities like Philadelphia, handguns are responsible for most homicides and violent crime. The most recent FBI data shows handguns were involved in 59% of murders in our country. How will you address the issue of the use of handguns? Because a push for an assault weapons ban only addresses a significant but small part of the problem.
So First of all, yes, I am a gun owner, and Tim Walz
Nailed it. God, I called that shit.
is a gun owner, and we're not trying to take anybody's guns away from them.
Ooh, 2 for 2. Now we need to move into assault rifles. Now I'm going to ban those.
But we do need an assault weapons ban.
What the fuck? Ooh, nailed it.
Assault weapons are designed to kill a lot of human beings quickly.
And put
And
holes.
have no
Weapons
place,
ban,
and have
yes.
no place, I'm gonna get to it,
Yes.
and have no place on the streets of a civil society. We need universal background checks, which, to your point about handguns, is about saying that it is just reasonable to want reasonable gun safety laws that say we should do background checks that we ought to know. It's just reasonable. You might want to know before someone can buy a lethal weapon if they've been found by a court to be a danger to themselves or others. You might just want to know.
And respectfully, we do understand that.
But you're asking
Yes.
about.
I'm
you're
asking specifically about handguns because many of those handguns aren't
universal
purchased in
background
places.
checks
Yes,
apply to handguns.
yes.
do.
But in
And
many
s-
instances, those handguns aren't even bought lawfully. Yes.
Finally.
Which is why I also have been very adamant for years. In fact, I myself protested at a gun show probably 10, 15 years ago about the gun show loophole and why we need to close that. Because what ends up happening is that gun shows at flea markets, gun dealers are not, under existing law in the past, required to register their sales. And so you are exactly right that a lot of homicides, for example, a good number of them, I don't have the statistic in front of my mind, are committed with illegally purchased guns. And that's why we need to address each entry point in the issue, including universal background checks, closing the gun show loophole, and what we need to do as a general matter to focus not only on reaction to crime, but prevention of crime. So you're raising a very important issue that has many facets, including what we need to do in terms of reasonable gun safety laws and what we need to do around crime prevention, what we need to do around crime deterrence. But listen, I have personally prosecuted homicide cases. I have held the hands of mothers who have come to me crying, who have said, I only want to talk to Kamala because they knew when they sat down, I would treat them with the dignity and respect that they were entitled and due about the loss of their child, often their son, to gun violence and the need to take it seriously. And we must take it seriously in every way, understanding it's not just about a soundbite. It's about a comprehensive approach that deals with the tragedy of, to your point, everyday gun violence in America. It's real. It has had a profound impact in terms of trauma that for the most part has gone undiagnosed and untreated. The trauma that exists in communities around the violence of losing their children, losing a brother, losing a father, an uncle. All of that must be addressed, and we have to have a holistic response to
Are
it.
there things we haven't thought about yet? Because every time we bring up this issue of gun violence, universal background checks comes up and a ban on assault weapons. Are there other solutions that you're also thinking about that will get at this issue?
Absolutely. For example, part of what we did as vice president with the president, we were able to pass the first meaningful gun safety legislation in 30 years. And part of what that involved was millions and millions of dollars to put more mental health counselors in public schools, right? Because we know that there is an aspect of this that is about treating the trauma and dealing with it at its source before it ends up manifesting itself in a problem. There is the work that we need to do that is about putting resources into communities around violence prevention. I've been a big advocate of that for years, which includes what we need to do around putting resources into community-based intervention that is not just requiring on the good people in the community to volunteer to do the intervention, but actually paying people to do it because it's a full-time job. It's about understanding what we need to do to, again, understand that, to your point, we have to have a holistic response to this issue and prioritize it instead of reacting to the tragedy that sadly they are too predictable. Let's all agree, enough of that. There are very few solutions that we haven't thought of. We need to put the resources into them.
Madam Vice President, we want to move to the topic of reproductive access, something that you have worked and leading on both for the administration, Democrats, and now the top of the ticket. You've said that as president, you would want to codify Roe. If it came to your desk, you would sign a bill that did that. Roe protected access until fetal viability, which it also says is, quote, at about 7 months, but it may occur earlier, even at 24 weeks. So do you similarly support also codifying Roe's restrictions, which allowed states to ban abortion in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy unless necessary to save the mother's life?
We need to put the protections of Roe v. Wade back into law. And when that bill gets passed by Congress, I will proudly sign it into law. Understand what is happening in our country. Over 20 states have passed what I call Trump abortion bans because I understand how we got here. The former president handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. They did as he intended, and in state after state, laws have been passed criminalizing healthcare providers. I don't know if anyone here has heard most recently the stories out of Georgia. Tragic story.
This is where I'm with her. I don't believe that abortion should be banned. I know there's going to be a big conversation. Oh, it's going back to the states. Yeah, I think women should be able to get their health care. I don't think it should be up to the states. I think that should just be a federal thing, that if a provider wants to offer that service, then they should be allowed to do that. If you don't like abortions, don't get an abortion.
About a young woman who died because it appears the people who should have given her health care were afraid they'd be criminalized after the Dobbs decision came down. Laws that make no exception even for rape or incest, which means that you're telling a survivor of a crime of a violation to their body that they have no right to make a decision about what happens to their body next, which is immoral. An approach that doesn't take into account that most people, I think, agree you don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body. If she chooses, she will talk with her pastor, her priest, her rabbi, her imam, but it should not be the government or Donald Trump.
These are the same people that forced you to get the COVID vaccine. Just saying. Not to say the vaccine was even bad, but right to do what you want with your body. So there you go.
Telling her what to do about her own body and her life. So that's where I stand. We need to put back in place the protection of Roe v. Wade and put that into law.
And those restrictions that are also in.
We need to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade and let an individual, in consultation with her doctor, make the decision based on what she can determine, because she's smart enough to know.
I have no say on abortion, but I also think it shouldn't be a primary source of birth control. Yeah, I'd like to think that people aren't going down to the abortion factory. I'd like to think that it's a very serious decision that people are going to make. I don't think people are just going and getting abortions. I don't think that's a thing.
What's in her best interest instead of having her government tell her what to do, especially a bunch of people in these state capitals who think they're in a better position to tell her what to do than she is to know what's in her best interest.
Before we conclude, Madam Vice President, the Joyful Warrior has been used to describe
You
your
didn't see that just a
campaign.
minute ago, though. Okay, I'm back to my joyful part.
And your opponent and Republicans have at times weaponized you laughing in campaign ads for.
See how they ask questions about her opponents, but they don't actually hold her accountable to the things that she has said? Maybe that's a little bit biased. Just saying. They brought up Trump multiple times and things that Trump has said, but what about the things that she has said? You can get her opinion on her policies because she's right here. You know?
For example, why is joy important to you to insert into this election? And what do you make of Republicans using that as a way to suggest that you're not a serious candidate?
Well, sometimes I think, and I'll say to whoever the young people are who are watching this, there are some times when your adversaries will try and turn your strength into a weakness. Don't you let them. Don't you let them. I find joy in the American people. I find joy and optimism in what I see to be our future and our ability to invest in it. I find joy in the ambition of the people. I find joy in the dreams of the people. I find joy in building community. I find joy in building coalitions. I find joy in believing that the true measure of the strength of a leader is not based on who you beat down, but who you lift up.
She's trying to spin this that her cackle was because she found joy in people, when everybody knows that her cackle is because she's nervous. It's a nervous tick. You can't erase the videos of every time you were pressed and you had a nervous cackle. It's a reaction. It's human. It's normal. But to try and tell people that it's from the joy of Americans, come on. Just don't.
And I think we should all find joy and have a sense of optimism about who we are as Americans and what we mean to each other and what we can do to lift each other up.
Madam Vice President,
Madam,
President Biden spoke to former President Trump after the attempt on his life this weekend. Have you spoken to him?
I have.
And earlier today, I assume?
Yes.
How'd that go? You want to give us some intel?
Sure. I checked on him to see if he was okay.
Yeah.
And I told him what I have said publicly. There's no place for political violence in our country. I am in this election and this race for many reasons, including to fight for our democracy. And in a democracy, there is no place for political violence. We can and should have healthy debates and discussion and disagreements, but not resort to violence to resolve those issues.
On January 6th, your vehicle was allowed to kind of pass a viable pipe bomb. We've seen.
No, I was in the building.
You were in the building. And we've seen what's happening with former President Trump. Do you have full confidence in the Secret Service to
I do.
protect all of you?
I do.
You feel safe, you and your family?
I do. But, I mean, you can go back to Ohio. Not everybody has Secret Service. And there are far too many people in our country right now who are not feeling safe. I mean, I look at Project 2025 and I look at, like the Don't Say Gay laws coming out of Florida. Members of the LGBTQ community don't feel safe right now. Immigrants or people with an immigrant background don't feel safe right now. Women don't feel safe right now. And so, yes, I feel safe. I have Secret Service protection. But that doesn't change my perspective on the importance of fighting for the safety of everybody in our country. And doing everything we can to, again, lift people up and not beat people down so they feel alone and are made to feel small and made to feel like they're somehow not a part of it or us.
Madam Vice President, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
I've appreciated this. Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, they definitely didn't grill her as much as they grilled Trump, that's for sure. There was very little interjecting back and forth to keep people on track. Literally like none of that.